Joe Ortona, chair of the Montreal or the English Montreal School Board. We spoke, I guess, a few weeks ago in the wake of the government's announcement. Bernard Drinville, the education minister, talking about over $500 million, although the number, I guess, is still to be determined, as they say, 540, 570. Nobody seems to know. What we do know is it's an awful lot of money cut from school boards across this province. And now, the part that really kind of adds salt to the wound is in an interview given yesterday by Bernard Drinville. He's actually quoted as saying, right, yesterday, we lack everything. Talking about schools and personnel coming back for the new school year. It's a race against time, according to the minister. So all this is happening as he has cut all this money from school boards. Joe Ortona, as I said, is chair of the MSB. Joe, let me get your reaction, first of all, to what the minister said, and then we'll talk a little bit about the budget cuts and what they're going to mean. What was your reaction when you heard that?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on, Aaron. This government is just a constant contradiction of one thing after another. I mean, they said education was going to be their number one priority. They've governed as though it's anything but. They slash funds in education to make up for their mismanagement, and they do so on the backs of the children's futures. It's mind-boggling that the minister, just openly admits, we're lacking in resources, we're lacking in staff, we need more people, but at the same time demanding that we continue to slash and cut. Everywhere. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and that you do more with less, in effect. So we talked about, last time we spoke, Joe, trying to figure out where these budget cuts were going to hurt most. You've had a chance between then and now to figure out how this is going to play out. So let's detail this. Where is this going to hurt?
Well, where's it not going to hurt? The truth is, some people, we don't even know where to begin to cut, because it's impossible to do what the minister is asking, which is, cut, but do so in a way that doesn't, diminish any of the services that you provide. But that's impossible to do, because everything that we do is to provide direct services in students to kids. And they never reversed on the cuts that they announced in June. They said that they announced $570 million in cuts. And because of the backlash, instead of canceling those cuts, they maintained them and said, okay, well, we're going to reinvest, though, up to $540 million. But here's a list of conditions and things that you need to do in order to qualify to receive this money, many of which we're not going to be able to do.
Does that mean fewer teachers? Does it mean, what does it mean specifically?
It definitely means that some boards and service centers are going to look at schools to close. We already had one adult education center that was announced to be closed outside of Montreal. It means cutting positions, maybe not teachers, but speech pathologists, child psychologists, orthopedagogues, child care workers. These are all people that provide direct services to children, that provide services above and beyond the bare minimum of what you get in terms of education in a classroom. So education, is in jeopardy.
Look, I'm reading again from the quote from Bernard Drinville yesterday. He said, we're lacking everything. We're lacking, as you just said, special education teachers, psychoeducators. We're lacking psychologists. If the idea is we know there's this giant gap, right, in various resources that will not, need to be filled by the beginning of the year, but with less money to do it. I mean, you talked about one particular center closing. Is there a threat that other schools might have to close?
Look, it's a possibility. I mean, I don't know what the situation is in each school board and service center, but I mean, you're looking at perhaps transportation services being slashed. You're looking at potentially schools closing, which means less teaching positions, which means more children in a classroom, which means more oversized or overcrowded classes. I mean, it's really a dire situation. It's the reason why the Quebec English School Boards Association, seeing as though we were being largely ignored in the multiple letters that we wrote, threatened court action. It's the reason why we joined a coalition with Ensemble, Unis pour l'école, because we wanted to make sure that we had a broad coalition of people fighting these cuts and basically telling the minister, this doesn't make any sense. You need to reverse course. So far, it hasn't been fruitful in that regard because the government stubbornly is just forging ahead.
All right. Well, let me go back to that because it seems to me when we've talked about decisions in the past, I always ask the same question of you, which is, did you consult or have the government consulted with you? And the answer more often than not is no. They found out or you found out about this through the media. Is there any difference this time around? After these cuts were announced and you came out and other boards and service centers came out and said, wait a sec, we're not going to be able to do this. Has there been consultation with the government?
If you can call it a consultation, the government announced the cuts and basically said you have 24 hours to give us your thoughts. That's not a consultation. That's a veiled, phony attempt to be able to say that they consulted with the boards and the service centers, but it's not real. And of course, everybody scrambled to give the feedback that they needed to give in that very limited amount of time, and nothing came of it. It's only the backlash that they saw when the government understood that they're actually not going to get away with cutting more than $500 million in education over 1 year after they already cut $200 million the year before, that they said, oh, okay, well, hang on a second. We're going to put more money. We're going to put up to $540 million. Of course, hoping that people weren't going to read the fine print, which is most of you are not going to qualify to get this money. So it's a beautiful headline, that we're putting $540 million more than we said we were gonna in education. But at the end of the day, it's nowhere close to that. And at the end of the day, we're still left with a huge deficit that we need to figure out and need to figure out how we're going to balance, which we can't do unless we slash services.
So let me ask, with respect to what you said about the Quebec English School Boards Association, right? This challenge now, this suit, you're going to get involved in this. How is that going to work?
Well, the Quebec English School Boards Association had written to the minister multiple times telling him that this was unconstitutional, that that we were not going to take this lightly, that the manner in which they were proceeding was illegal, the requirements that they're holding in terms of all of the funding parameters, that the conditions that they're imposing in order to qualify to get the money is both illegal and unconstitutional. And if they don't leave us any other choice, we're going to have to go to court. Of course, the government, in their normal fashion, didn't even bother to respond in any way whatsoever. So there's absolutely no dialogue with the government at this time, and really has left us no choice. And so school boards are looking at their individual situations to see exactly how much they have to cut and where they would have to cut. And most of them are reaching the same conclusion. It's impossible to meet the government's targets. And so we have very little choice other than to go to the courts yet again, seek a stay, in which hopefully we'll be successful and we'll be allowed to use our surplus monies to offset the costs of these cuts. And some of these cuts will not be enforced. And so we're going to be getting the money that rightfully we should be getting.
But, Joe, we're weeks away from school starting, right? And this is going to court. This is not a decision that's going to be coming down anytime soon, is it?
Well, the thing about, the more long-term, the broader constitutional challenge of the budgetary parameters as a whole, no, is not going to be decided before school starts, not even close. But it doesn't have to be. That's what a stay application is for. It's like an injunction. It puts things on hold. That's what we did for Bill 40, if you remember.
Yeah.
The ESBA and the school boards were able to get an injunction on that, and that's what we're trying to do between now and the school year. And courts take injunctions very, very seriously because they know that they're urgent and they need to be decided as quickly as possible. And so we have every reason to believe that could be heard and decided before we need to adopt a budget at the end of September.
Just as a final question, maybe this kind of doesn't give me the full scope here. So Quebec English School Boards are doing this. The French service centers, which are also affected by these budget cuts, do they even have that as an option?
Technically, they do, but they don't. So let me explain. I mean, they could, because they stand to benefit too from a stay. To be able to benefit from monies that they otherwise wouldn't benefit from. The problem is that they are all directly under the control of the Ministry of Education now. So who is going to, openly, because court cases are public, who's going to openly join a court challenge taking on their employer? I mean, that's just not going to happen. There is no director general of a school service center who would make that recommendation to their boards of directors. It's not going to happen. But parent groups, for example, parents' committees, parents' associations from the French Service Center network could do it on behalf of their service centers. Unions, employee groups could do it on behalf of their service centers. And of course, nothing stops them from publicly endorsing or encouraging the challenge, and nothing stops them from even contributing financially if they wanted to.
It's going to be very interesting to watch and interesting to see what reaction, if any, comes from the government before this actually comes down, this stay happens if it does. Joe, always appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You bet. Joe Ortona, chair of the English Montreal School Board, on this challenge to the provincial government on those gigantic budget cuts.